Welcome back to the channel. Today, you and I are going to talk about starvation mode. What is it? Is it real? And we're going to talk about that based on observation and common sense and on the scientific literature. And then what might actually be happening if you feel like you have been or are in starvation mode, what else could be happening? So what is starvation mode? Starvation mode is the very prevalent idea that if you eat too few calories, you will stop losing weight. And in fact, you might even gain weight. Is it real? Short answer, no. Longer answer, still no, but there's a bit of truth. As with many myths, there's a little bit of truth that it is built on, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. So let's talk about the observation. I want you to think about the natural world around you. We have all seen pictures of starving people. People die of starvation all the time. Millions of people have died of starvation. So where is starvation mode there? If the idea is your body senses that there's a lack of food, and so it holds on to your fat, why do people starve to death? We don't have to rely on observation alone, however. We do have scientific literature that speaks to the idea of starvation mode and is it real? At the end of World War II, there was a scientist by the name of Ancel Keys. He worked at the University of Minnesota. He ran a study that became very famous called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. Now, they weren't looking for starvation mode. What they were doing is seeking to help all of the many people in Europe who were suffering from starvation and trying to figure out how could they best help them. So they wanted to understand starvation more. So they had men come. These were conscientious observers looking for a way to somehow still serve in the war effort. They volunteered. This would not be ethical, and there's no way this would happen today. But they had these men come. They lived at the University of Minnesota. They spent a chunk of time, I believe it was 3 months, eating a normal diet, observing them. Then they started reducing their calories. They actually cut their calories by 50%. It was a semi-starvation mode, and they did this for 24 weeks. That is a really long time. Okay, so what happened? We're going to put some pictures up here of what these men looked like. As you might expect, based on our observations in the natural world, they look like starving people. They are skin and bones. Now, it's interesting to note their metabolisms did slow down, but they got to 5% body fat with the slowing of their metabolism. So at no point did it slow so much that it stopped them from losing weight. They got to 5% body fat. So while we did see that their metabolism slowed, and that right there is the bit of truth, metabolism does slow as we lose weight. Part of that is because we're smaller. A bigger person requires more calories than a smaller person. So as a person gets smaller, they require fewer calories. So their metabolism slows in that way. That doesn't necessarily explain all of it though. Sometimes there is a greater slowdown than what would be explained simply by the reduction in size. And this is called metabolic adaptation. There are several reasons for this. One of the biggest chunks of it is something called your NEAT reducing. NEAT stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That is such an obnoxious word. That's why we're just going to call it NEAT. I talk about this all the time on my Instagram stories. I talk about how I'm getting my NEAT up. I'm outside walking around. NEAT is all of the activity you do outside of structured exercise. So things like fidgeting. Do you know any leg bobbers? My husband constantly does this with his knee, like he shakes the whole table, right? Those kinds of movements, fidgeting, just walking around, daily movement, that's your NEAT. As you are dieting and reducing your calories, you subconsciously reduce the amount that you move in this way. And those men certainly did that. And so that is the bit of a piece of metabolic adaptation. It's interesting though that you can have some control over that by consciously increasing your NEAT. So you can put a step tracker on, you can work towards that. But even if you weren't, remember, none of those men stopped losing weight because of this adaptation. They got to 5% body fat. So you might be thinking, well, that's all well and good, Kim, but I've experienced this. I have been losing weight, trying to lose weight on really low calories, and I wasn't losing weight. And then I increased my calories. I was eating more food and I started losing weight. I was in starvation mode, right? So you actually weren't, because remember, it doesn't exist, but there are some things that can explain that. One of the most common is what I'm going to explain to you now. I'm going to put this up here so you can see it. So this is typically what I see. You set your calories very low. I'm going to pick a random number. I'm not saying this has to be the number, but let's say you're at 1,200 calories. And what you see, the part of it that you see is you set your calories at 1,200, no weight loss for a good period of time. You decide you're going to up your calories because you've heard of starvation mode. You up them to 1,600 calories. You lose weight. And you think, I wasn't eating enough. I was in starvation mode. But that's just a piece of it. You were missing a big chunk of it. Look over here. You set your calories at 1,200. And sometimes you ate 1,200 calories. But often you didn't because 1, it's very restrictive. 2, you're human. And so there are times that you're lick, bite, and tasting. There are times that you are not accurately calculating how many calories are actually in a food. You go out to eat. These calories add up. And over time, your average for the week was maybe 2,000 calories. You're struggling. You're not losing weight. You hear about starvation mode. In your mind, you increase your calories to 1,600. In reality, not on paper, but in reality, you just reduced your calories from 2,000 to 1,600. You now lose weight. So it's not starvation mode. It's actually doing what everybody has to do to lose weight. You have put yourself in a calorie deficit. I know that can be hard to wrap your brain around because you've only seen that one piece for so long. But remember, science has shown us it doesn't exist. Our common sense shows us it doesn't exist. This is something that we have made up, and in reality, it looks like it's happening when it's not. Starvation mode doesn't exist, and that doesn't mean you should be eating super low calories. I want you to know I'm not saying, hey, just eat as few calories as you want. You can still keep losing weight. That's not healthy nor realistic. Set your calories at a modest deficit that you can adhere to, and remember to keep your NEAT up. Those are my practical takeaways from this starvation mode topic. I so hope this has helped you. Come back again next week. We're going to be hitting some more topics that might confuse you about weight loss. And if this did help you, please hit that subscribe button and get on back here.